I mean, of course you've got to make money, you've got to live. But that's not been the kind of primary object. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing progressive rock, would we? We'd be doing
that's true.
Something else. Right. We'd be in a boy band. Look at us.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Clive Nolan.
My name's Mick Pointer and we are in Arena.
Yep, and you're watching Live Prog.
Well, we're cozy here in the beautiful tourbus with Clive and Mick from Arena. How are you guys doing?
So far, so good. We're almost 6 weeks in to this whole process. A week of rehearsal and 5 weeks touring. And so, yeah, I think we're holding up quite well, actually. Yeah.
I mean, it's
a couple of gigs to go.
How many?
Two.
Two. Ah, you're nearly
tonight and tomorrow night.
Yeah. But you've been living out of this bus for like a month. How is it to be with a group of persons in a confined space?
Yeah, for me it's actually surprisingly good because I was lucky enough to be given a room on the bus on the basis that I was really struggling after the 22 tour and I wasn't getting enough sleep. So you kind of make yourself ill. All your sort of resistance goes down. So after the tour I was in not good shape. So I said, look, let's keep the tour short. But Mick wanted to do a longer tour, so he tempted me back with a room, and I have to say it's a very nice room, and I have slept brilliantly. So actually, while everyone else is looking like they're 150 years old, I'm actually feeling absolutely splendid.
Yeah, 20 years younger.
Yeah,
20 years younger. Okay, so you could do another tour then, getting even more younger.
Yeah. Well, he is. He's off next week. So,
yeah.
And we're all going home to a darkened room and sleep it off for 2 weeks.
The tour is to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Arena.
Yeah.
Which you two started back in I think a little bit before 95, right? Maybe somewhere 94?
Yeah, we actually met up about 93 actually.
93.
When the process started, but as Clive mentioned sometimes in the evening, it took much longer. We'd agree to meet and then something changed and then it got cancelled and then we'd maybe meet maybe 2 weeks, then 2 months later and so on. So we never rushed anything. There was no intention of actually doing anything about maybe we might make some music at some point. That was it.
All right, so it took a while. It wasn't just like you met and you agreed to do some music. It's a kind of a process.
Any intention of forcing ourselves to do anything, which frankly was a great idea. Because we slowly eased ourselves into it, basically.
Yeah. What was the point when you actually started making music together?
About 6 months, and then Mick came over to my sort of loosely called studio, and we started work on an idea. Well, it was actually Mick's idea, this kind of rhythmic thing, and I sort of put some chords to it. And actually, the very first thing we ever wrote was the opening of Valley of the Kings, which is our opening song in the set as well. So we're playing the very first thing we wrote, which I think is a good way of doing the 30 years, as it were. So,
that's why we decided to start with it.
When you started working on the music, which eventually became Songs from the Lion's Cage, when you started, was it like we're going to do like an album and that's it, or was the intention of like we're going to go as far as it goes?
I think when we started, it was all about just making an album. I think the intention grew as we realised that perhaps what we were writing was interesting material and we were pleased with it, and it kind of felt positive. And I think that by the time we'd done the album, we were ready to be a band and to sort of continue the idea into other albums. But certainly when we started, it was really just a case of, well, let's make a bit of music and see what happens.
Making music and then making that music into an album and then creating a band around it, a very big leaps. And the responsibility and moving on with that leaps up, and neither of us were really sure that's what we wanted to do. Clive was always doing plenty of stuff anyway, and I wasn't sure if that's what I fancied doing anyway. But circumstances turned to what they are, and here we are.
Yeah, 30 years later, you're still together.
Yeah.
Because when you got to the point that you were going to do an album, of course you need more musicians. So the first lineup, was that based just around the album?
No, the first lineup was what we always call the accidental lineup. In other words, it was the people that happened to be around. Hey, do you want to do a bit of guitar on this? Or hey, you play bass? What do you know? So we kind of just found people initially who just sort of happened to be around. And as fate would have it, the guy that we had lined up as a guitarist moved to Ireland, so we couldn't use him. So we had a gap there. By the time we'd written the album, we still didn't have the right singer at that sort of first stage. We had a chap who was going to do bass, and indeed he did, Cliff. So you know, by the time and then we started recording the album in a setup that didn't really work. So we kind of pulled up stakes there and ended up in Micj's studio. Micj from Palace and many other things. And that was where it suddenly became a lot more focused. I think Micj did have a very good influence on us from that point of view. Suddenly this rather vague idea started to take some identity. And at that stage, Micj knew Keith Moore, so that's how Keith got involved in the guitars. And we had advertised to find the singer, and of course we found John Carson, and we had our first lineup. So you know, the songs from the Lion's Cage lineup was still a little bit what you might call an accidental lineup, but there it was. Which is why I think, you know, normally with bands you'll rehearse in a garage, you'll play in the local pub, and you'll do all this changes of lineup almost unseen. Whereas we did our first album, it actually went straight into people's sort of eyes, as it were, and therefore all our lineup changes that happen in subsequent years were all rather public. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, I noticed that. We had, of course, the change mostly in singer, first of all, with Paul Reichen stepping in for the second album. But what I did notice, if you take the first two albums, with the covers and everything, sound-wise, they really fit together.
But they were intended to.
They were, okay. They
were intended to. That's why you got the Crying for Helps going through the two. So you've got 5 main songs on each album, and then you've got these little Cry for Help pieces between each of the songs. You'll even find structurally there's a similarity between Solomon and Sirens. You can sort of put one on top of the other. I don't know why, we just artistically it was just an interesting thing to do. And so the first 2 albums are very closely linked, yeah.
I think it was helpful that the first songs of the Lion's Cage sold much more than we ever expected, and so the success of that took us a bit by surprise, to be honest with you. And so, like Clive said, the intention was, maybe we should repeat what we were doing, what we were doing, and in turn that would give some longevity to our fledgling career. But because of the lineup changes that happened, we were initially going to go on tour, and because of the lineup changed, we didn't go on tour with songs from Lion's Cage. So there was, it wasn't until we did Pride that we actually went on tour. Okay. So that was a bit of a problem as well. Been a problem start to finish, but that's the nature of dealing with people, musicians. Live music, everything. You have to deal. There's all the other aspects you have to deal with.
Yeah, and then with the third album, it feels like the whole thing really changed. John Mitchell joined. Was that part of that change, or was that already set in motion before that?
Well, John joined in time for the Visitor album. He was involved in the creation of the album. So yes, but there was we had a change of attitude as well. We decided we really wanted to do something special with the Visitor, and suddenly we'd had some success with the first two albums, and we thought, well, okay, why don't we go about this album differently? I remember we spent a lot more time in the studio. We actually used studio time to sort of organically develop the material that we took into the studio, which is something we've never done before and probably not since. And also we spent a lot of money on the artwork, really a lot of money on the artwork. And we wanted this thing to be completely different in the way that we every album we make, we go for a different approach, and that was something we went for with the Visitor, and of course that kind of worked out rather well.
And you brought in somebody from the outside, Simon Hanhart, that we hadn't really done before, someone like him. So yeah, there was if you like, a leap up. We thought we needed to make that leap up, and that was our attempt at doing that, and I absolutely think it paid off.
Yeah, definitely. Then you had another lineup change, another singer. I mean, when I look back, I believe the first 5 years there were 3 different singers. But that change in singers, did that have an influence on the band?
Yeah, it's always going to make a difference to the fundamental sort of structure of how you write songs. I mean, Paul Wrightson's voice obviously different in range and style to John Carson, and indeed when Rob Soden came in. So you've got to be a little bit aware. So obviously when we wrote Immortal, we were writing it with Rob's voice in mind, and then it was going to be down to Rob to find a way of singing what Paul had sung before and John had sung before that. And that, the eras of singers will influence the eras of the style of music and the way that we put the music together, definitely.
Yeah. So it's something I could almost have the idea, like you have to keep that in mind if you have a new singer, that he has to be able to sing the old material.
Well, yes, I mean that has got progressively harder because when Paul Micj joined, he had a much higher range, so of course we started writing for that higher range to get the best out of his voice. So then of course when we needed a singer after him, we needed someone who could cope with a much bigger range than had been the case perhaps back with Paul Wrightson. And of course Damian can, but not all vocalists can, so it just depends. Basically it's that is one of the sort of challenges that we're very aware of.
Yeah.
There are ways around it. We find ways around it.
You had some periods where, like Rob Soden stayed on for quite a few years, Paul Micj quite a few years. You had some more stable, how do you say it, stable time?
Stable time, yeah.
Yeah,
sure. But even that's a bit of a fallacy because, I mean, like when Rob Soden was in the band for, technically, I think it was about 10 years, we were inactive for about 6 years, weren't we?
Correct.
There was quite a large period of time where we took time out. So obviously if we're not doing anything then there can't be any arguments.
That's true, but at least he stayed on for a couple of albums, so
yes.
Did that also give some rest in creating the albums?
Actually, one of my favourite albums Rob is on, which is Contagion. I thought we were going in a slightly different direction, but yet we still had a bit of the Visitor about what we were doing. I know there was. I think a lot of people don't view Contagion as one of their best albums, but I actually do.
Oh, a lot of people do. It's still quite popular with when I talk to people.
It didn't sell anywhere near much as the Visitor.
That was a different time.
Of course, yes, a different time. Sure.
it's kind of hard to pick a favorite album. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot to choose from, and there's a lot of amazing albums on it. When you look back at these 30 years from when you started, you were going about in a certain way. Are you doing creatively, music writing wise and everything, are you doing things differently now than when you started out?
I think you get into a rhythm of how you go about things. I mean, generally speaking, everyone's entitled to write. They can throw ideas if we're moving towards a new album. And very often, like Mick will get together with John Mitchell, and they will come up with these what I call the riff segments, and then they'll send those to me, and I'll put them in a folder, and then Mick will come down and we'll work some bits out, and they go in the folder, and I write quite a lot of stuff as well, and that goes in the folder, and I'll get some bass lines from Kylan, and that'll go in the folder, and then it's basically down to me to sit there and make sense of all of that lot and turn them into songs. But you know, we have a sort of there's a point where you know you've got enough material that's strong. We had a 3-folder system where the top folder is the absolute best material, is straight away, it kind of feels right. The middle folder is the stuff that might work if it's put in the right way and developed in the right way. And then there's the bottom folder, which actually had another name, but we won't go into that. But basically that's the stuff that you almost certainly won't use.
And we could sell that music.
We can give that to other bands.
To other prog bands.
Yeah.
And they'd be very happy with it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, that's an idea. I mean, sometimes, you know, maybe your not so good idea could be the best idea for a band.
Gosh, what a high opinion we have of ourselves.
I mean, you know, we are our own judge and jury with what we do.
Yeah.
And that's one of the greatest things we've ever had, is we're in total control of what we do and how we go about doing it. So many bands are told by record labels what they have to do and when they have to do it, and generally that brings most bands to an end, and that we haven't had that. We could have been with a record label.
We had a couple of things along the way.
Yeah, but we decided to go the hard route. But ultimately, I think it kept us sane as well.
Yeah. You once considered going on a record label?
We were offered a major at one point.
Yes, we were.
And we said no, which was the most enjoyable thing to do at the time, considering the struggles we've had over the years. But yeah, just having our own choice and doing our own thing, there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, it depends what your main intentions are when you do music. I mean, you know, we've gone into this not to make, it's not been about money. I mean, of course you've got to make money, you've got to live, but that's not been the kind of primary, otherwise we wouldn't be doing progressive rock, would we? We'd be doing
that's true.
Exactly
else.
right.
We'd be in a boy band. Look at us.
Yeah. And someone's got to pay for this.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
you know, but our kind of primary, you know, sort of well, the motivation is the music and creating something that we think is good and that satisfies us, and you can't have somebody telling you how, you know, what you're supposed to do if you're going to go down that particular route. So, you know, we did what we thought was best.
Yeah.
And I also think very often with these bands that do get signed, even the prog bands that have been signed, it's usually the death knell for most of them. They're barely able to survive because of the way that they will have to work within the confines of the record label. And I think sometimes that's you know, I don't think we'd be here for 30 years if we'd signed a major deal or something like that.
Yeah.
Probably richer.
I'm not so sure about that because you know, we can choose how long we're going to be on tour, and as you can see, it's very nice here, and it is. But to do it for week after week after week, and a record label will be forcing you to go out on tour constantly, and we need the breaks as much as we need doing it. And you've got to have time to think beyond just this living like this. And as lovely as it is, I'm not suggesting it isn't great, it is. But there's just so much you can take of it. And you need to get away from it for a long time.
I always wondered how my destiny would go. Taken by the ocean, adopted by a UFO.
if you look back at these 30 years, are there things like you look back and you say, I wish we would have done that differently, or?
Oh yeah, constantly.
Yeah.
What I wish we'd done, of course, because we make albums, we bring the music out. Who's to say that album shouldn't have sold 30 million or 300? And we make the best music we can make, and why? Who's to say that it wouldn't sell 30 million or 300? There's something else somewhere else that's stopping it or making that happen, and so we do our absolute best to try and promote it and do whatever we can, and hence we're here to promote and do whatever we can. But there's only so much we're capable of doing, so there's always a bit of play-off with things. And so sometimes I just think to myself, oh my God, I wish we'd done that a little bit more, and we could have sold more there in that territory, and we could have done this. But who knows? That's hindsight. Who the hell knows what would have happened? What I know is we are where we are now. And I don't think that's such a bad place, to be honest with you.
I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
And the good things, the highlights, I mean, you look back, are there some things that you're like particularly proud of in those 30 years that you've done? The jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we wouldn't be doing this for 30 years if there weren't some points which were worthwhile. And, we've had some amazing concerts. Those will be the ones that we're going to remember. Had some disastrous concerts as well. Those are the ones we try. Well, actually, funny enough, those are also the ones we remember.
Yeah.
So the ones in the middle we don't remember. But then we've had some successes. I mean, we've had some real peaks. We've charted. We've played some great festivals. We've had some amazing reactions along the years. We've got some very dedicated fans. We have sold lots and lots of albums, lots and lots of merchandise, and we've created 10 studio albums that I think are pretty good, I think that's quite a nice legacy, from that point of view. And I think there's always been a reason to kind of get out of bed and do it again, and that's I think like I say, 30 years. I mean, you list the bands that have done 30 years.
Not many.
They're not many.
No.
I mean, that was what I was thinking about. I mean, when you guys were working on songs from the Lions Cage, I mean, take Solomon. Would you have guessed that 30 years later people would still be wanting to hear that every show?
I know, it's crazy. There you go.
Really no.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's a pleasure to be able to, not suggesting that we might play it tonight or not, depends.
Yeah.
Haven't decided yet.
Yeah, we'll decide later. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's not many bands make it, and that's probably down to the pressure they're made and put under by the record label of pushing albums out and going on tour. And again, leading back to where we were earlier, it does make a difference. But when we are in control of our own destiny, and everybody can go off and do their own thing when they want to do it, and then we can come back together again when we're recovered from the last time.
Yeah.
So, but as we get older, the recovery time becomes a little bit longer.
Yeah, well, despite the fact that you guys are doing this like in such a short time, so many shows. I mean, Clive, you still had time to write a sort of a tour diary every day.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's that's kind of my therapy. I get up in the morning, I spend 2 to 3 hours putting together the tour diary. And the funny thing is, everyone calls it a tour diary. Do you know, I hardly mention the tour. I just ramble. But that's kind of part of the fun of it. It's quite therapeutic. It gives me something to focus on and do. And I quite enjoy it. Everyone finds their way of surviving on a situation. I mean, we're all stuck in a tin can for 4 weeks. You've got to, some people will literally get out and go for a jog. Some people will wander into town with a purpose. I've got to buy 3 croissants and, a cup of coffee or whatever it is. Some people will stay in bed. Some people will get up and just stare blindly at TV or whatever. So, we've all got our ways of surviving.
I do the paperwork.
Yeah.
That's my extremely wonderful day I have.
Okay.
But, I don't mind that either. I get
Yeah.
a sense of pleasure out of doing that
Yeah.
sometimes.
Imagine a gun to a Stone Age man, or an image caught on a video cam. Walk through a village when the plague was ripe, in a hazmat suit and a promise of life.
You mentioned Damian. Of course, he joined in already a couple of years now, but he did one album, The Theory of Molecular Inheritance, which is a real tongue breaker. But with Damian, it also kind of comes full circle, because you once said that Damian was kind of your original choice for.
And I tell that story in the gig tonight. Yes, he was not the original choice, but he was an early, when John Carson left. We literally rang him up and invited him over to the studio, and then we changed our minds on it while he was on his way over, because we just worked out that he was in too many bands at the time. We just thought this isn't the right time, and that happened a couple of times during the 30 years until he finally joined. So yeah, I mean, he's been in the frame for this for on and off throughout the whole history, really.
But over the 30 years, he still has been in a lot of bands.
Well, he has been in a lot of bands,
Yeah.
but you've got to choose your moment. And I don't know, when we asked him this time, it just seemed like the right moment. He wasn't in the kind of stuff that was going to interfere directly with what Arena was trying to achieve. If he'd still been in Threshold, for example, I think there would have been too much of a crossover. So it was just delicate timing.
I'm glad that he joined. I mean, he's when I listen to the last album, I mean, I absolutely love it. But also when I hear him sing, the older songs live, it's different. But he's really doing a good job there. So.
But that's the beauty of the different singers. Of course, it's different. They're not. Each singer doesn't come to impersonate the previous singer. They've got to basically embrace the songs and make them their own. That's the job, as Damian's done now.
Yeah, definitely. So 30 years have passed. What's next?
Retire.
I think with anything like this, it's very, when you're actually the person in the eye of the storm, it's a bit hard to see outside of it. I mean, for us, I think we need to get off this tour, take a breather, and then we can have a think about what the possibilities are. I mean, we're not the kind of me and Mick aren't the kind of people who go, that's it, we're splitting up. On the other hand, what we don't want to do is make any promises about what we're going to do next. We just want to just relax. I mean, people are asking us all the time, what are you going to do next? Well, we haven't got to the end of the tour yet. And so let's get to the end of the tour. I mean, is there going to be another album? Maybe. There's a concept and a title and even a bit of material. It's not impossible. But at the moment, I think what we need to do is get off the tour. Everyone needs to recover and just take a breath, and then we can have a think about, what may come up in the future. I mean, someone puts enough money on the table, we'll be back out in about a month's time.
Where do I sign up?
Yeah.
You've got to bear in mind, that these to get to the point of these 6 weeks has taken 18 months before that, longer, in the process of getting there. So it's on your mind endlessly, and so it's very difficult to look beyond tomorrow, because that's the last day of the whole tour. So you start all the way back there, and it's very difficult to go, what are we going to do next? What else is it? Because you have to think about finishing what we've started, and so that's why once we've done, we fly back to England on Sunday morning. We'll all go to our respective homes and just do what you do when you go home. Your own shower, your own bed, your own food, whatever. And then slowly, then we'll start going, hang on a minute, what about maybe? And then we can consider.
Yeah, it doesn't even seem possible right now to think, I just want to get to the end of it.
Yeah.
But, we're recording the last few gigs. So out there will be recordings of the shows, and then eventually someone's going to start, we should do something with this recording. And then before you know it, you're sitting on top of a live album. What do you do when you bring an album out? You have to go out and promote it. All these things are possible, but what we don't want to do is make any promises or deadlines. We just want to stop, take a breather, and then we see. Yeah, that's how we've survived 30 years.
Yeah, it is. And you bear in mind your life from the last tour took more than a year to come out. So it's not, we know it's there and we know what we have to do to go through the process of doing it. But it ain't going to happen tomorrow, next week. That's we know that about ourselves. And I think it pays off to be that way, to be more thoughtful about these processes.
Yeah, and I think if we do anything else, we want people to want us to back. If we come and play in Holland again, we want people to want us to come and play in Holland again. I saw them last time, I'll give it a miss this time.
That does happen.
When we do something, it has to be an event.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
I can see, and it's there in front of me. Nowhere to turn to, drowning in the sea of rain. Don't run, don't hide, the devil will find you anywhere. We should never have tried, the sin was always there.